Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.
Hello, this is Wil the Werewolf, and this is Werewolf the Podcast, and today I'm just going to talk about one of those lucky times when life just gives you things. I held my palm paw over his face and nose. The snot and saliva bubbled as he tried to shift his pitiful pus from my grip. I pinned him hard to the table, enjoying the crushing sensation as I pushed. I smothered him to the point where he could no longer make any significant noise. He had got awfully angry at me in his Audi while awaiting an audaciously long change of lights. I was a little hesitant at the lights as there was a definite confabulation going on the left side of the junction. There were confused drivers, really not knowing what they were doing. None of them was going to get the opportunity to even look at my paintwork, never mind touch my paintwork. Now, I can be a patient wolf, but this was not the best thing this person could do. The Audi made me aware of his anger aggressively by hammering his horn and haranguing me. I looked in the rearview mirror to gauge my new target and smiled. It was a big guy in his late 40s in one of those Q5 things. The type of man that thinks they run the world. These are the type that I love to show that they do not, and that they have no power in reality. I had got out of my vehicle and walked back towards the Audi, smiling and grinning. Fen was laughing alongside me as we walked. This was going to be fun, but it could not be done here and now in the manner which I wanted to. As I got closer to the car, the man forced his way out of it. It took some time. Fen stopped short and looked up at him as he yodeled his threats in a deep and scary voice. He was a man, a very big man. This is going to be so fucking cool, Fent sent into my mind as he nodded his head towards him. Are we fucking him up here or what? Come on, Will, let's wolf out and fuck him up in front of his peers, or at least kick him in the nuts to shut him up, please. No, I sent him. You get in the passenger seat and let's hope he's going somewhere a little quieter where we can take our time. Okie dokie, Fen said, trotting around to the passenger side and hopping through the door into the seat of the Audi. I stopped in front of the giant, looked up and went into my am-dram role. I'm really sorry. I fawned my fear before the man. I'd seen it enough times in life, so I know how to do it very well. The simpering, and then I turned and ran back to my car. I fucking thought so, you little snivelling shit. Get back in the fucking car and get your ass moving, he yelled with a jeer in his voice. He must have felt the most macho man at that moment. I saw him in my rearview mirror, posturing in front of the crowd and wanting to be noticed and be feared by his pointless peers. All I could hear was a wolf laughing in my head as Fen started taking the piss out of the big fat man as he sat next to him. When he got back in his car, little did he know, he had an invisible passenger who would be journeying with him to his destination where hopefully we could mess up his day. Fen was my telepathic GPS that would let me find my target and destroy him. Fen would be my eyes and ears on the journey. Fucking fun! Now I held my middle fingers on either side of his nose. I could hold his skull in my clawy pawy, like an apple would be held in the hand of an average human. He was still shaking and trying to mumble. He was a fool. He'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it was an easy meal. An easy meal for me, a very uneasy meal for him. My fingers point towards his eyes as he stares at me. He feeds my soul with fear. No, not fear, it was a pleasurable terror that he gave me, much more than fear. The dumps of hormones and the electrical activity in his head are all in overload. It is just the way I like it. Art can be so variable in its outcome. I start to imagine the claw of my pinky finger growing, which it does. Slowly, first extending, then going under the skin of his jawline, tearing and reaching under the flesh. The tip gently touches the bone of his jaw and scrapes onwards along its path as he tries to scream for something. Not crying for help, to get the notice of others, but just to scream his pain in an audible form. Oh, the sound is quite beautiful, and I play with it by twisting and turning my finger in the wound. I pushed my hand yet harder into his face, palm over his mouth to smother him some more. I enjoyed the crushing defeat that I could give this thing. He could not fight me. He was lost. He could no longer even emit a yell or cry. He bubbled in a pathetic manner below my hand. Life was so good. Well, for some of us. I held on, muffling the noise and trying not to squash the pathetic brain boxes humans have as skulls. They're really easily broken if you're not careful. He shook his head, trying to dislodge my hand, but he couldn't fight it. I was a bit lost and a bit excited that he had not lost hope yet. That would come. I wanted him to break his spirit. He would provide a meal for my ego as well for my body. I held his head securely as the acute pain of the incision stopped for the man. I stopped my worrying of his facial wound so he could get a moment of relief before I began again on this journey. As I held him there, I kept staring into his eyes. They were the windows to what was happening in that mind of his. It was where I saw the pain rise and fall as I worked. So much comes from the eyes, and you learn through experience how to work a person's thresholds by using them as a gauge. Sometimes I remove those eyes and work on feel, but that can spoil the fun, so I keep the eyes for my use more often than not. I looked deeper into his lost soul. He was ready for more pain after his mind had settled. He had dealt with the pain of the injury and now had to deal with the pain of the lack of knowledge as to if and when it would start again. Was mental pain worse than physical pain, or vice versa? Or was it the same? I now imagined the claw of my ring finger starting to grow and extend. It grew from the finger slowly and made its way to the man's eye socket rim. I shifted his focus from my eyes to the extending claw by just looking in its direction. He started to try and remove his head away from the extending tip. I just snarled and smiled inside, holding him firmly. He could do nothing, and I could do anything. The pointed talon slowly entered the eye socket. First the tip touched the skin of the bottom eyelid, then it started to push the eyelid over the surface of the eye itself, initially closing it. Then, still growing, the tip slowly pierced the eyelid and touched the white of the eyeball. It's hard to puncture or penetrate an eyeball. Even using a sharp surgical scalpel takes a lot of pressure to do any cutting. He was trying to scream through my hand that I pressed on his mouth. He wriggled like the hooked maggot that he was. The talons of my claws hooked that little grub. The sclera is tough, so it took a lot more pressure before the eyeball gave in and burst in a satisfying gush. The aqueous humour split from the now deflated sphere onto his cheek. Clear, jelly-like, viscous liquid ran down his prominent cheekbone. The joy of it rang in my dark soul. Oh, how he screamed and convulsed as this took place. If only I could have kept his eyes open so that he could see it all happen. Imagine the tip of the claw reshaping your eye, pushing against it and affecting your vision. Imagine the pain and the pressure of the sharp point digging into your... Then the loss of sight as the eyeball bursts, the pain, maybe even a little relief at the ending of the process. Your eye is gone, but you are grateful for the release of the pressure. I had not allowed him to move, and my palm muffled most of his agonized screams. How weak simple humans are. His whole body tensed and shook at this treatment, and he wrenched his arm from its fixed position on the table. The large nail that had been holding his limbs solid stayed fixed in the wood, while remnants of skin and tegument connected the nail to the torn-out hole in the freshly freed limb. The image condensed in my mind as it formed in perfect beauty in my view. I was silenced and stunned for a moment as it happened. He grabbed the thick pelt of my arm with his damaged right hand and tried to pull it from his face. I shook him. The point of my claw moved in the now destroyed eye and its socket with his frantic movements, and he went limp. Fuck. At first I thought he'd died, then I realised that he'd just passed out from the pain. It was okay. He would wake soon, I could then continue. I'd not ruined it. Thank fuck. That would have been such a shame. It's far too easy to kill people, you know. I need to be so much more careful in life. As he slept, I re-nailed his hand to the table so that he could not get it free again when he woke. I sat back and watched and waited. Oh, by the way, some advice on nailing people to things. Please don't do it actually through the hands. They're a bit too delicate and teary. They can be easily torn off the nails by someone struggling. I like to go in the wrist at the base of the hand into the meaty structure there. Sometimes you nick the blood vessels, but if you are careful and stay to the inside of the wrist, then you get an excellent spot to nail a person down. Sometimes it annoys me how hard it is to have fun with people. My posit left my body for a moment. Fen sat next to me on the floor, me the human and him the wolf part of me. We shared our thoughts on things. We discussed what we would like for our evening meal that day. He got to taste the food I ate as though he ate it himself, and he had a thing for Mexican food at the moment. We were, well, into our Deliveroo order when, with a forced intake of breath, the spread-eagle man on the table woke. He coughed up some mucus and blood and turned his head to vomit on the table and the floor. "Help me! Help me!" he breathed to an unseen, uncaring and non-existent audience. I was sitting naked on the ground, my back to the wall opposite him, a cheerful smile on my blood-stained face. With painful difficulty he opened his unbroken eye and met mine. I gave him a little wave. I had to laugh at how good I felt that he did not throw up on my feet. "Welcome back," I said. My posit snarled and I stood up before him, very naked, very bloody, and very unashamed. He begged me to be released. I smiled and shook my head. "What, and spoil this fun we're having? Why on earth would I do that, my friend?" I walked towards him and started to soak up my posit again, changing back to the wolfman form I loved so much. Oh, and by the way, this is not the painful flopping about that we see in the crappy films. The posit seems to leap into me, and I've changed. It kind of turns into a fog and soaks in through my skin. Not worth the expensive special effects that are often employed in these mega $1,000,000 movies. I change in a manner that is not that photogenic or made for films. I wish it was a bit more dramatic, to be honest. The man looked up at me and asked, "What are you?" I laughed, a now guttural and good-natured laugh. He cringed back as far as he could into the table and, through bloody saliva, said, "What do you want from me?" I allowed my head to resume its human shape so I could talk to him. "To be honest, Mr. Bond, I just want you to die." That's not true. I just want to kill you and do that in a long, drawn-out, tortured kind of way that, you know, is fun. What have I done?" he asked. "Well, you've all done some shit that's not nice, I guess, in the eyes of your God, so he is punishing you by letting me do this shit to you, or something. You must have been a very sinful boy at some time. Like to play with yourself, did you? Or maybe you've not done something fucked up and horrible, but you will someday. So God is, getting his work done pre-sin, so that's my excuse for what I do, really," I replied. "What did your father do so evil that he passed his sins on to you to suffer for?" Mwahaha! I went into full thespian mode as I began my Shakespeare-like speech. "God sent me to punish the unrighteous amongst his people, to rid the world of sinners. An Old Testament God is he." In a more matter-of-fact manner, I then told the truth. Well, the fact is that I do not really need an excuse for what I do. I just do it because I like it, really. It's fun. I kind of get off on it. He then dropped his head and cried. Tears sprang from his eye. Snot leaked from his nose. As the werewolf, I am God, and I am going to crush these insignificant creatures for no other reason than it feels terrific. No God can tell me what to do. I am the one. Spot the Highlander quote right there, please. I walked to the table, flexing my hands into fists, ready to finish the work that I started. I'm an artist when it comes to this shit. Also, I was getting bored and a bit hungry, and sometimes you have to eat. Eating living flesh, as I've said before, is the tastiest, especially while the fleshy thing watches you eat it. I reached out to the man and tore the t-shirt from his torso. My claws projected from my right paw. I took the barb now at the end of my pinky finger and pushed it between the bottom ribs of the man's ribcage. He screamed and asked me to stop. I continued to hook my finger up under the bone and lift. Clunk! So lovely to hear that noise, and he screamed again. I sighed. Not long for him to live now. He has started to lose too much blood from his wound. His blood pours from the incision that I have created. On top of that, he has probably had too many adrenaline dumps now to register any new horror. He is just a yelling bag now and a little boring, to be honest. I lever the finger beneath the chest through the intercostal muscle. Oh, how he warbles. He opens his soul audibly to me. I could feel the agony and the loss of hope as he gives his all. Eventually, the rib pops clear of the cartilage of his sternum. He goes silent. The only noise, the gasp for breath as he struggles to get air into his damaged chest. Only gentle twitches run through his body now. I grab the rib between my fingers. He goes rigid as if at that moment of orgasm. The bone is slick with blood and difficult to grasp, but I manage to get it and pull it free from his spine with another satisfying clunk. It moves freely, just being held by the muscle. I struggle to tear it free from its body. It's difficult for him too, and he passes out once more with the pain. Eventually, it gives way with a tearing sound like wet silk being ripped. Well, I suppose it sounds like a rib being torn from the body, really, but you've probably never heard that. Well, maybe you have. If you've had ribs off like a... Anyway, he is now limp. I check his pulse in his neck. It's there, weak, but it's there. I gently shake the man's head until he slowly wakes again. I give him a couple of gentle slaps. Eventually, his eyes open and he muzzily, and with a little attempted moan or two, wakes up. I take his chin in my hand and show him his rib. I then take the rib and slowly put it between the carnassials of my jaws and crunch it. His unbroken eye is now dark, not registering what is going on anymore. He slowly comes back as he sees me chewing on his rib. It crunches delightfully in my mouth. The wolf part of me enjoyed the marrow in the centre of the bone. He tries to whimper and then goes limp. He's on his last journey to wherever he believes he is going. I start to eat. This meal is better than the Mexican. Cancel the order, please.
Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.